Alex Sanfilippo is truly one of the greats in the podcasting space today. He has amazing knowledge and wisdom when it comes to how to be successful as a podcasting host. And today I asked him to share his lifelong experience on how to do this very successfully. And it was just gold nugget after gold nugget. So this one is kind of intense. We go into a lot of content really fast, but if you're paying attention, this will absolutely change your ability to be a successful podcaster. On top of that, Alex has an absolute gift at service-based business. He truly just gives and gives and gives, and it always comes back to bless him. If you want a great role model for how to conduct business in a way that really just blesses your clients and your network, he is a great example of that. So I'm excited about some of the insights you're going to hear from him on how he does that. Welcome to Reach. This is a show for podcasters who are not only trying to grow an amazing show, but they actually want to make money. I'm excited to share with you the secrets that I've learned along the way, as well as introduce you to some amazing guests who are going to really help you take your show to the next level. I'm your host, Brunson Smith. Let's dive in. Guys, I'm super excited to introduce Alex Sanfilippo here. He is just an incredible influence in the podcast community, and I asked him to come on here and share some really cool thoughts. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Brunson, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here with you. You do an incredible job with everything I've seen you do in the space. So, truly an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much.
So, Alex is the founder of PodMatch, which I've started using recently and has been just a really cool platform. So, but something I was talking to Alex about, and I hope that you guys will really dial into this. I think that interviews can be made or broken by a good podcast host. And if you do it right, there seems to be some things that if they're done correctly, it just changes everything. I'm not saying that I am that host, but I think if anyone would know, Alex at a minimum has access to just thousands and thousands of podcasts that you've been around and you've been interviewed 1,000 times. And anyway, so from that perspective, what do you think are the main overarching things that just make a great podcast host?
The very first thing that I think many of us just want to skip, because Brunson, the most common question I get in podcasting is how do I get more listeners? Not how do I be a better host? So I think we're asking the right question today, which is how do I be a better host? And the question that's always skipped is, are you providing what your listeners want? And that to me is number one on being a good host, because the thing is, I have a friend and she's a good podcast host. She's really a great one. She's just not my style because she interjects and cuts off her guests a lot. And many of us are like, that's not like what a good host does. We're like, oh, hold on a second. Don't finish that sentence since you're in the middle of let me talk for a second, right? And many people are like, that's not good. She has taken the time to discover her listeners like that about her. And so many people be like, no, she's not a good host because she's interjecting and people don't like that. But the reality is she's talked to people and they do like it. And her podcast is bigger than, almost she gets millions of people who listen to her show on a monthly basis. And so she has done very well by doing something that most of us would say, this is bad advice. You should not follow that. And the reality is we shouldn't. Like, if I interject, my listeners will tell you, Alex, that's super annoying because I know them as well. But I think the number one thing we have to do is we have to know as intimately as we can who it is that we're actually serving with our podcast, their wants, their needs, their desires. Like the more we can put ourselves in their shoes when we're conducting an interview, the better it's going to be. And if you look at any of the really big podcasters, many of them, they have this down, right? We all use Joe Rogan as an example. Joe Rogan knows who his avatar is, his ideal listener. He knows who they are. They like listening to 3 or 4 hour episodes. That's not me. So if he's like, oh, well, Alex isn't listening, so I need to shorten my episodes, it'd be bad advice, right? So the very first thing, and I know I kind of went on a little rant here about this, but it's so important that we understand who it is that's listening in their ears, right? Like who is hearing us, and knowing that can provide context for the rest of this.
Do you have any thoughts on how people can begin to acquire that data?
Yeah, the best thing you can do is if you're like, Alex, I'm new, I don't have any listeners yet. If that's the case, who is it that you think that you help? And when you figure out who that is, go where they are. And a great example of this is if you're like, man, I like freelancers or digital nomads, go to the trendiest coffee spot in your town, right? Like if someone's traveling and they're going to work from a coffee shop, which one is it? And just ask them for a second. Hey, I'm starting a podcast. I think you're the type of person who's going to listen to it. Can I just ask you a couple questions? And the questions don't need to be too pointed. You just need to start understanding how they think. Because what you might hear is like, oh, I'm always in coffee shops working, but I try to never listen to anything for longer than 10 minutes. And that's just an example. Then okay, my episodes need to be about 10 minutes. They need to be really tight conversations if I'm going to be having them with guests, right? Like you can start figuring this stuff out. So if you don't have a listener, think about who it is that you believe you're going to serve or who you want to serve. Go where they are and just do your best to start getting into their world to understand once again how they think. If you do have listeners, anyone who's engaging, whether it be on social media, email, DMs, whatever it is, right? Just be like, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? My favorite way to do that, some sort of video conference call where you can actually kind of see them virtually face to face. If they won't, see if you can exchange some voice text, anything that you can do to once again, put yourself in their shoes and hear where they're coming from.
That's fantastic advice. I think that comes back to this overarching concept that we deal with in the business world all the time. It's that it doesn't matter if you like your idea. It matters if the market does, right? We try to impose our will on the market constantly. We're like, no, this is what you should like. Then very quickly we find out like, oh, they rejected it. And, and then I've done this with at least 2 businesses now where I'm like, no, I'm going to build the product first, then see if anyone wants it because I know it's awesome. But yeah, it's exactly to that point. So I love that.
That reminds me of an episode of your show, Reach. You had Alicia Barr on the show, and it was on, I'm just telling everybody here, like go back and listen to that. It was on August 21st, 2024. It's titled Sell Like a Woman. I'm a man, and I listened, and it was super valuable for me. She talked about needing some resistance in what you're doing so that you can learn how to counter it. And so same thing, like you're saying, like talking to people will create some form of resistance. We're like, I'm thinking about doing this show, right? And then I'd be like, I don't know. Don't be like, oh, now I can't do this at all. Just adapt, adjust, learn from that. Like I know Alicia was talking about sales in that episode, but the reality is this works for a podcast host as well. Lean into where that resistance is coming from because that's where the gold is really going to be at.
I love that. And I'm also flattered that, you took the time to go listen to that. That was a great episode.
It was super good. You did a great job. Again, Sell Like a Woman, August 21st, 2024. Everyone finish this and then make that your next thing.
Totally agree. So we kind of have that piece. Go to your audience, learn what they are telling you, find your avatar. What other things would you say make someone a great podcast host?
From there, it's of course delivering for those people, right? Figuring out what they really like. But we'll just kind of go with an example of maybe like a 30-minute type of interview show. If it's going to be like a 30-minute show, like you need to keep it pointed, right? If it's a 2-hour show that you're producing, then you have some leeway to be like, Brunson, I heard you did something really fun this last weekend. Can you tell everyone about that? Right? You have the leeway for that, the time for that. But if you're like, okay, my audience likes a really tight conversation and they want practical, actionable tips, they are looking to be different by the end of this. Again, if you know that, then you've got to get really tight with what it is that you're going to be providing, which means for many podcasters, entrepreneurs, we got a little bit like ADD in there where we're like, ooh, a squirrel, right? Like I want to, tell me more about that, right? When we know that doesn't further the narrative that we're looking for. And I think that that's really the key of it, figuring out the narrative that you want. A podcast should always flow. It shouldn't just feel like really chunky and random segments throughout it, right? If you have segments, they should still flow well. But if it's a conversation, it's going to last 30 minutes, you want it to feel like a coherent conversation, not you, the host, asking 10 pre-decided questions that maybe flow together, maybe don't. Maybe the conversation taking a different turn and you brought it back in a really different direction, right? Like those are some of the things that I find really key. Is again, if it's me 30 minutes, if it's me an hour, figuring out what you can do to maximize the value in that time. And a lot of that comes from our prep. At least that's what I believe. Like our prep time is so key with this.
So when you talk about prep time, what things are you finding important? What do you focus on in those prep hours?
First off, I want to make sure that I know what this person has done and where they're going, right? I've been on some podcasts as a guest where there was no prep time and they wanted to talk about my former 15-year career that I did in aerospace. First off, I mean, listen, I wasn't an astronaut, skydiver, or fighter pilot. I was behind a computer. We were manufacturing parts. I love the job, but it's super boring to talk about. And also, we had a bunch of government contracts. Most of it, I still just don't share, really shouldn't share, right? And not that there was anything cool. It's just like the nature of that work. And people didn't take the time to learn who I really was. So they're asking me questions about that. But if they would take in just an extra 10 minutes, they'd realize, okay, that's what Alex used to do. What he's talking about now is this. And so I think at the very least, like holistically figure out who it is that you're talking to. Like, what is it that they've accomplished? Where can you kind of tie in gaps? Maybe you can pull something from Alex's aerospace job that led him into full-time podcasting, right? Like maybe there's a connection piece there. But at the very least, I always start there. And I think that we have to first off go to, if they have a media sheet, they have an active profile on a certain social media platform that has this information, not one that they haven't been on in 3 years, right? Because now it's outdated. You want to go where the information is most fresh and then connect the dots of kind of where you started to where you are today. And that to me is the baseline of good research being done on a guest. One of my favorite ways to do this also is to ask them, hey, have you been a guest on another podcast? If so, what are some of your favorites? Can you send me a link to those? I want to listen to you. The thing is, like, before I came on this show, I like to be a good guest too. I listened to your podcast before I got here today. And I put it in my queue a while ago before when we decided we were going to do this, so I can be prepared. Like, I know how you like to be spoken to and what your audience is probably into, because I think you're pretty in tune with that as well.
I love that. And you know, something else, and thank you for the compliment, by the way. And something else I think that's really valuable that I've noticed that I think is on thread with what you're saying is, you can find the most boring person on earth, but if you find out one thing they're passionate about, they won't shut up. And they know how to tell the story in a way that's engaging because they're used to telling that story. It's like they might have the most boring life ever, but this one crazy thing that happened, they've told that story 1,000 times. And again, that's where I think the research comes in. If you know where that hot point is, and maybe not that specific story, right? Again, not to be, redundant, but exactly in your case, if we start talking about your that 15-year job, it's like the passion maybe just isn't there the way it is with PodMatch. And like, I know that's where you're like, you put an insane amount of time and energy and passion into this project. It's exactly that. Like, if I can dial into that passion, I think that's where a really good interview can happen too. So yeah, I love that thought.
Yeah. And I agree on that. It makes me think back to a time where I interviewed somebody. It was their first time on a podcast. And the guy was pretty nervous. He came from like a tech background, so fairly nerdy and boring, right? But he did something that was really interesting. He met with Steve Jobs at one point and ended up earning like App of the Year award and stuff like that. And all that was fairly boring because he was just talking about like, oh yeah, so the technology was new. We did this, right? But he shared a story about how he got his original funding, which was by telling the guy how he almost got arrested outside of a Weight Watchers meetup. They called the cops on him because he was trying to help them get fit faster and they didn't like it or something like that. And when he told that story, I could hear in his voice, me being the host, that he was actually like proud of that story, proud of that moment, even though I can tell he was like a stand-up guy who never did anything wrong in his life. It was probably the only interaction he had with police officers ever, right? But I could tell he was like really proud of the fact that, you know what, I stepped out of my comfort zone. I got away from like the tech stack and I started actually just meeting people. And so we dove into that. And to this day, it's one of my most successful interviews with somebody that no one's ever heard of. But we found, like you said, that little thing that's like, okay, everyone can grab onto this and would love this story. It's less boring than the rest, but it still drives the same point home. And I think that that's kind of the next thing that we should talk about here, which is the ability to actually listen in a way that is going to help you grow in your own curiosity as a host to ask good follow-up questions.
So when you talk about listening, what does that look like to you? What does good listening look like?
Yeah, a lot of people talk about active listening, which is great. Active listening, like take a notepad. So for me, like right now, if anyone was to be watching this, like I am writing down a note right now. It's not anything real, but I'm writing something, and like it's pretty, like it's not really very noticeable. Some people take pen and paper, right? Same thing, and they'll just kind of like jot down notes. So that's kind of like the idea of active listening. Like you're listening because you want to be able to hear them, to be engaged, and to find those points. But a step beyond that, I think, is looking for the ability to drive the narrative forward, as I already talked about, right? So it's like, okay, I want to know how this guy got his app to be approved by Steve Jobs directly, become the best in Apple. How can I get him to that point? I'm sharing that without getting into this stuff that I know my listeners are like, what? Right? Like, you developed what technology? Like, why? Right? Almost getting arrested for the sake of figuring out what to develop. That's an interesting take that can still connect the dots. So it's not just active listening, it's listening in a way that you can relate it back to your listeners that they'd be interested in. And so it's, again, driving the narrative forward. I think part of that good research, this whole thing kind of works holistically, is knowing the end goal, beginning with the end in mind. Like when I start a conversation, we want to know, where is this thing going to land? And it doesn't always land exactly there, but it typically gets pretty close. And your job while you're listening is to find those different key points that your listeners will love that, again, drive that narrative closer to the finish line that you're looking for.
I love that. Something once I shared, and actually they're doing, so there's a program out there called Cap Show. They're doing a big summit. Anyways, and I think you were interviewed for this as well, if I remember correctly. And with something we talked about was my idea has been kind of this hero's journey, right? The Joseph Campbell model of there's kind of a journey that seems to follow in a lot of stories. And like you're saying, I know that there's a path to most stories. There's the excitement of starting. There's the failures that come right out the gate. There's the small victory and then another massive failure. And then there's the like rising up where you finally go, okay, I think I've got this now. And then often this kind of climactic moment of I really figured it out at this point. And to your point, like if you're, and I'm using this as an example, obviously, but if you can trace that thread throughout and you know there's a story there and you can ask questions, wait a second. So before you crushed it here, where was the big failure? Oh my gosh, we went bankrupt. It's like, okay, there it is, right? Then did you have any success between that? Okay, we had a huge hit here. And did it plummet? It plummeted, man. Like then we messed something else up and our bank account got locked up. We lost all our money, you know. And so I think to that point as well, there's always that thread and that path that if you can identify it, you can really walk someone through their own emotions. Because they often forget. People often kind of go, oh, I just have to share the highlight. I have to share the good stuff or whatever. So yeah, I love that as part of that approach. So very cool.
The highlight isn't really a human experience, is it? Right? It's just not. And like I can think of one guy I interviewed, which was a really big name, and the interview should have done really well, but it was one of my least performant interview conversations I ever released on the podcast. And it's because the question I asked him, like, man, like you've seen so much success. Like I know this didn't happen overnight. I know that there was a ton of failures along the way. That's what I want to talk about today. And he goes, well, actually, pretty much happened overnight, and we didn't make any mistakes the whole way. And I just stopped. I'm like, what? I'm like, I have human listeners. I don't know if you know what that is, but humans are really messy, make tons of mistakes, and eventually sometimes do really well, right? And I didn't say that, but I was totally caught off guard. I'm like, where do I go with this, right? Like there's no journey here. Like, I don't know. I love Lord of the Rings. My wife and I are in the middle of rewatching it. Frodo doesn't like find the ring and throw it in the fire and it burns up. The end, right? There's no movie there, right? Like there's these ups and downs, these twists and turns. And the reason that works in movies is because it's also real life. We can relate to it. We resonate with it. And a good podcast conversation has that flow, like you're saying. Hero's journey. At this point, like that strategy is known, but the amount of people who can actually execute it, even in Hollywood movies, is still extremely rare. So I love, Brunson, that you like pointed that out, because I think that right there, that's the formula. That's the key. It's been discovered. Executing it is the hard part.
Totally. So here's something that I first struggled with, and I wonder if you've got some ideas on this. When I was first podcasting, I really had a hard time with listening and having my next question ready. And it was so stressful for me. Like, oh my gosh, okay, like I'm trying to listen, but then all of a sudden it would stop and I go, oh my gosh, what do I ask next? I have to propel the conversation forward. What advice would you give to someone that's struggling with that?
First off, I still struggle with this one as well. I'm a type A personality. I like having the flow. Again, like beginning with the end in mind. I have like the whole structure. The thing is, sometimes it goes completely right and you get the opportunity to ask all or most of those questions. Especially the more that you listen to that guest that you're having on other podcasts, do your research a bit more. The more that you do, the better you can kind of prepare. But here's the thing. You don't actually know what they'll be like really excited about that day, what's changed since their last interview. And sometimes you might get to question 3 on your list of 5, right? And then they just go on this like dropping like gold nuggets everywhere that you can tell they're super passionate about it. And maybe it's time to cut out question 4 and question 5 and say, you know what? I'm listening. My listeners might have heard you say what you just said that piqued my interest a little bit. Let's dive into that a little bit more, right? And listen, there's no shame in saying, you know what, I'm going to go kind of off script on this. This is not what I was planning on asking you, but tell me more about X. Why did you do Y? How'd that end up getting you to Z? Right? Like your listeners will appreciate the fact that they're like, oh, wow, Brunson in real time is shifting where he wants this conversation to go because he's thinking about me. And that question right there, I was wondering that one too, actually. And so you want to make sure that you leave space for that. For me, what I've done with my format is instead of having like questions, I just have bullet points. And legitimately, while I'm interviewing somebody, again, I'm not perfect at this. I will literally cross them off as I go along, right? And sometimes when they say something I know is taking a different direction, I'll literally delete some of it. I'm like, I don't even want to ask anymore. At the same time, we do have to be willing to let go. It takes letting go of some control. Like there's always that question. You're like, oh, I'd really like to ask this. Sometimes you just can't. It's not going to flow. It's not going to add to the narrative that you're creating with that guest. And so again, as someone who struggles with this as well, I still like after years of doing this, that's still there for me. I just have to remember to step back a little bit and remember it's not about Alex. It's about the people that I'm serving and listening.
Oh gosh, I love that. I love that. Something that just rang in my mind as you were saying that, a little aha moment that struck me a few months ago was often the follow-up question is way more powerful than the question, right? And that's something I think that I didn't understand. It was like, no. I have a list of questions. I have 10 questions actually, because that's felt like a fair number, right? You have my 10 questions I'm going to ask in this podcast. And they'll say something golden. And I go, next question. And what I've been realizing now is that if you can ask a really solid, wait a second, wasn't that scary? Oh man, like, and you can just launch into this like emotional experience. Again, that human experience where someone goes, oh dude, I was terrified. My wife's yelling at me like, go get a real job. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that comes out when you ask a good follow-up question too. And I think that's another thing that's like so valuable, right? Like if you, yeah, exactly like you, I don't do questions anymore. I just do bullet points. And I'm always looking for the good follow-up question. Now that's kind of more what I'm leaning into, because I realized, oh wait, that's where the money is, right? There is just in those little, wait a second, is there something here that's not being brought to the surface that was a really powerful thing? So totally.
The follow-up question is more powerful than the question. Put your name after that, put it in quotations, clip this piece out. That's good, man. That's really solid. And it is absolutely true in every way.
Yeah, totally. So we've kind of taken this giant sweep here. So we want to find our target. We want to do our prep. We want to be a good listener. What else would you say comes to mind in terms of part of being a good host?
Making your guests feel really comfortable is often overlooked. And you did a great job with this. We had like a bit of like, I'll just call it a green room session before we started, where we had some back and forth. You'd be shocked at how many, maybe you wouldn't, and maybe someone listening to this is like, oh shoot, this is me. As soon as someone joins, they're already like recording, like, okay, Brunson, you ready? And there's no like synergy being formed. And for me, I'm actually really this is my least popular thing I've ever posted on YouTube. So I'm going to approach this slightly, but I'm kind of against interviewing your friends in your existing network, because you have this level of comfort with them that is weird for people on the outside, right? If me and Brunson had a bunch of inside jokes right now, you'd be like, why am I here? Right? Like, it's like, you can listen to us, but you're not in our world. Right? So I like it when people that are a little bit less familiar with each other are having conversations, because it makes for something better, but you still do need synergy. The way I've been approaching this more recently is I actually hit record almost as soon as the person joins. So like if we were doing this right now, like, hey, Brunson, what's up, man? Make it in the room okay? Have you used Riverside? It's pretty cool, right? Hey, I'm going to go ahead and hit record. We're not going to record yet, though. I just usually forget. So let me just hit record, and we'll just start in a little bit. Especially for me, sometimes I interview people that don't do as many interviews. And so it's just big like, I'm comfortable. There's no like, okay, are you ready? I'm going to count down from 5, and then we're going to be recording, because that automatically builds up this tension. And you'll often find that the person who shows up after you do that as your guest is not the person you were just having this conversation with. And so again, the green room is so important. You want them to feel really comfortable. If you're in your research, you realize they just got a puppy, ask them, hey, are you sleeping? I saw you just got a puppy. Is this your first one, right? Build that common ground, build that synergy while it's already recording, saying, I'm just going to cut that out. Hey, you ready? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hey, Brunson, just been chatting with you in the green room. Welcome. So glad you're here. Now there's no like weird moment where it's like, are you ready? Are you sure you're ready? Right? It builds up that tension. And so for me, the comfort of your guest, which is very practical to facilitate, makes the interview start off a lot less choppy. Therefore, you can kind of get into the meat a lot faster.
Oh man. What you said right there about doing that little bit of research to find those emotional points, I mean, that's just solid gold. I hope everyone was really tuning into it. I mean, I think that's one of those, I think that's just brilliant. I've not done that, but I totally think I'm going to add that to my list now. Going through and finding a recent life event or something, because it's so true when people get robotic, and it's weird. And if you're listening to this and you haven't hosted a podcast before, it will happen. You will hit record, and all of a sudden, it is like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, it is a different human being that shows up for that second part. And we'll be like sitting there laughing and joking. And he's like, well, I believe that the correct answer to that would be, and it's actually that type of voice. It's really funny because I've had that happen. I'm like, where'd the other guy go? You know, so
I laugh because I've experienced the exact same thing. It was like it was an amateur move for me to laugh over you in the microphone. As soon as you said, I'm like, oh, I've interviewed that person. Hello, Brunson, sir. Great to see you here. Right? Like, what?
Exactly.
Where'd the fun guy go?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's happened. It's actually happened a few times, but totally agree. So that's a really cool thing. So you do a little research, you hit the record button before it even begins. That's something actually I typically do as well. I didn't on this one, funny enough. So, but I think that it actually has made it much more, whenever someone's acting, stiff, like I'm going to record really quick. And I'll just, we try to just loosen up a little bit. So in terms of getting other people comfortable, is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, you want to get their agenda out up front before you even begin to let them know it's going to be included. Not all guests show up with some sort of, I shouldn't say that. Everyone has like an agenda of some sort, I suppose, right? Even if it's just to add value and serve. And that's always the hope, right? But if it's someone who has a book, I think they want to make sure that you're going to give them the chance to mention their book. And if you don't tell them up front, hey, I'm going to reference it, or it's going to come up at this point, just want to let you know we're going to talk about the different chapters throughout. If you don't do that front, in the back of their mind, they're listening to your questions, but also, is this where I'm supposed to interject my book? Right? Those are things happening in their own mind. You want to give them some clarity. A great example of this is I recently had Amy Porterfield on my podcast, and she's very experienced, so I may not have needed to do this, but I told her, hey, I know you've got your summit coming up. I'm going to record something separate and talk about your summit because it's not evergreen. It's only open once a year. But what I am going to mention is your top of funnel episode that you bring people into. I will reference that myself so you don't need to. I'll probably do it toward the end of the interview. And she literally was like, wow, thank you so much. Like that is a serious pro move. And she's like, okay, so I'll just follow whatever you say to do. And we had what she considered, and me, which I'm a little bit biased, but one of her best podcast interviews she's ever had. And I think it's just because we built this rapport. That was the only time we've ever met, is just during that interview. But hitting record right away, having a little bit of fun, and then me telling her, hey, I'm going to mention what you need me to mention for you to make this a win. And I think that when we do that for our guests, once again, you free in their mind that they need to be like, is this the point when Brunson wants me to say what I do? Right? Like they don't need to do that anymore. You've relieved that pressure for them.
Oh gosh, that is so gold. I've not done that. And I think that is a brilliant move, actually. Kind of, and everyone does, because most people, they're not getting on a podcast because they just want to go shoot the breeze with someone. They really do have something they want to talk about and a message they want to share. And often, yes, you're right, it's not evergreen. Very often it's not evergreen. It's usually a summit or an event that they want to promote. That's a brilliant move. That's a brilliant move to kind of get that and have that as its own little thing so you can also keep your evergreen content pure. Brilliant. So that's kind of our during the episode tips there. As we kind of transition into the after episode, maybe just after we stop hitting record, but maybe further than that, what ideas come to your mind in terms of how to be a great host?
One thing that I like to do is my podcast is about podcasting. I typically interview people that have done some form of podcasting or have something that can really resonate with a podcaster. I always like to give some sort of tip or suggestion for people, like if I'm the host. And so even Amy Porterfield, I found a broken link on her website. And so before we recorded, I brought it up. Not to be like, you have a broken link, right? Just be like, hey, I don't know who you want to send this to on your team, but I noticed this page doesn't work. I just want someone to tell me if that came up. So I put it in the chat and she's like, oh my goodness, thank you. Let me forward that to somebody else, right? And so I think that before or after the interview, it can really be any point, but in the green room, have some sort of quick win or upgrade for them is really just like a huge value add, right? You're kind of giving them homework and perhaps you don't find anything, right? Or you could even say, hey, now that I've interviewed you, we talked about your book a little bit. Would it be helpful if I left it a 5-star rating and a review on Amazon, if that's where you're selling your book? Just something like that is gonna make them say, oh my goodness, yes, thank you, right? And those little things I think really make you stand out a lot. What I do if that were the case, I would actually take a screenshot of it because it takes 3 to 5 days to post, or at least for me, on Amazon. And I'd email to them, say, hey, thank you again. I'll let you know when the episode's out. By the way, here was that review. And then when I respond with the episode, I respond to that exact email, reminding them, hey, I did help you out. Like, I did the solid here. Would you mind also sharing the episode? But I like the whole follow-up to be natural and to feel like, hey, not thank you for your time, we're done talking. It's thank you for your time and let's keep the conversation rolling and see what else there is that we can do together, how we can collaborate, how we can serve each other's audiences.
I totally agree with that. And I also would make a point here that a lot of podcasters, and this is maybe even a fairly recent thing for me, is these are people that are lifelong. If treated correctly, a lot of your guests can be lifelong, not just friends, but people that can really help grow your business and grow your mission and whatever else. And I think that's often forgotten. We're like, at least when I began, I thought, oh yeah, it's all about the content. Like my job is just to get good content. Thank you so much. I'll share this and I'll grow my own. It's like, no, your guests are a goldmine of resources and friendship and so many other things. And I think it's a brilliant idea, by the way, of finding something specific that you can give them as a win. And they're like, oh my gosh. And especially because I've interviewed a handful of times and that's not happened a whole lot. Someone's like, yes, I have something very specific. I'm going to write you a review. Would that be helpful? Man, that's really cool.
I just, for for sake of example, I literally just went to my podcast, scrolled down to the very first episodes. I'm looking at the first episode was me. So I'm looking at the next 6. And out of those 6, I have talked to 5 of the 6 guests in the last week, actually. This is going back years. I mean, I've been podcasting for a while. Not that I'm like always communicating with these people. It's just really lucky timing. I'll be real, but like I try to keep up with those people. And here's the beauty of podcasting. Unless you are interviewing like a true media trained expert that has done thousands of interviews, a podcast episode recording is a meaningful experience. And meaningful experience is the baseline of all friendship, of all relationships come from meaningful experience. Example, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, where it's like flat ground. I've gone up north to the mountains and done a couple whitewater rafting adventures. I remember every single person I was with on those adventures, some of them dating back 15 years. But I remember them because it was a meaningful experience. Again, for many people in this guest seat, this is that meaningful experience. You now have that baseline where you can always call back to that. For me, the only commonality I had with 4 of those 5 people that I'm still in contact with in this last week, one of them was like a friend that I brought on because I was nervous. So I wanted to interview a friend, right? The other ones are people that I just built that relationship with. So we still stay in touch and still have respect for one another to be able to keep the conversation going even many years later.
Man, that's so cool. That is so cool. You're able to like actually go back to those first episodes and see that. That's amazing. Well, and I think there's a certain level of vulnerability that happens during a podcast. And I think that we forget that sometimes people really open up their souls and they do it in such a public way. And there really is something powerful that's exchanged between a host and a guest during that vulnerable moment. And yeah, I think if it's carefully taken care of and cultivated, it really is pretty powerful. That's so cool. Alex, we've just hit some just absolutely gold nuggets here. I'm so grateful for you coming on the show and just sharing this stuff so openly. I want to add one little piece here that I've just observed from you, and this is something I think that if you're listening to this podcast right now, Alex is one of the most service-oriented people I've ever met in my life, and I really do mean that. Just from meeting you right at the gate, and it's funny because everyone that talk about you is like, well, Alex goes all in, right? That was just like a well-known thing was that money comes second, service comes first. And I see that even in the way that you host, right? Is that you just really put the guest first. You really, really like just make it an amazing experience for them. And then it always has come back for you. And it's like, it doesn't feel like that was the priority was, oh yeah, I can get something out of them. It feels like when I talk to you, 100% you're just like, yes, let me serve them to the max, really give. And it just feels like the chips, will fall where they may.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. At the end of the day, for me, man, like first and foremost, like I follow Jesus, and I'm not here to push like religion, but like the faith aspect of that, like that's just how I've built the foundation of my life on loving and serving people. And recently, I talk about the service side a lot. And recently, my wife, Alicia, who's a business partner, she walked into my office and she goes, "Alex, you know what's more important than how you serve people? It's how you love them." And she's like, and remember that, like serving them is great. We have a product, we have a service, but if you didn't have that, the way you love people is still the most important thing. And we live in a world where I just really sadly feel that like a lot of people just don't feel a sense of love and belonging. And so I was like, man, if podcasting right now, let's just say in this decade of my life, this is what I'm supposed to do, then I'm going to love people really well that are in this space if I get the opportunity to. Listen, don't get me wrong. I love being able to eat. I love having a car and a place to live, right? Those are great things. But the reality is like, I am never going to allow that to be the priority. I just can't. And so, yes, even more than service now that you just mentioned, is this new thing that I'm focused on, which is just remembering, hey, before even serving them, how do I love them? How do I make them feel? Are they in my guest seat? Then how do I make them feel like that they are valued, appreciated, loved, and that their message really matters? If I'm talking to a listener, how do I appreciate them so much they just feel like, man, Alex really just loves and cares about me? And so, man, at the end of the day, like that's the core message of what I have. And maybe it's what's helped me stand out as a host is just the fact that like I really do love people and care for them. And anyway, man, I know that's like a little bit of like a rambling statement there, but I hope that adds a little bit of value. And I appreciate you calling that out. It really means a ton.
Totally. And I hope everyone really dials into that. Of all the things that you said, I think that's by far the most important in my opinion, is that
Thanks,
if that's the impetus of whatever you do, like I just don't see how you can fail.
Yeah.
So
thanks, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Truly a blessing. Brunson, appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to another episode. I'm so grateful for your support. If anything on this show was valuable to you, I have one huge ask. That's just share it with your friends. And if you have a little extra time, go ahead and leave me a review. That's my big ask for you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.